Hey everyone, welcome to my official review of Transformers Rise of the Beast. Today is Sunday, June 11th, 2023. I saw the movie a few days ago during preview night, which was June 8th of 2023. I saw it just in the normal 2D screening. It is playing in 2D, 3D, IMAX, and IMAX 3D. There's a number of different ways to actually see this movie. Again, I only saw it in 2D. I do plan on seeing this a second time, and upon doing so, I would like to see it in IMAX. Not really big on 3D movies unless it happens to be Avatar, but I do want to see this in IMAX if possible. It is playing here locally in IMAX, but I know as the weeks kind of drag on, the showings that they have for this movie in particular, I even just looked at what's coming up for next week, and it's drastically reduced in terms of the number of times that it's actually playing in IMAX. But again, yeah, I saw it in 2D, but it's playing in 2D, 3D, IMAX, and then IMAX 3D. So just as I was getting ready to record this, I was looking to see if the weekend numbers had come out yet, and I do not see them on boxofficemojo.com. However, on the-numbers.com, it looks like they do have the weekend numbers here, at least the estimates. I believe for the domestic box office, the estimate was roughly close to what the estimate is here for the weekend. It says for a domestic box office, the weekend is $60,500,000. International box office is $110 million. For a worldwide box office weekend opening of a $170,500,000. I don't know what the cost was to develop this movie, but I think it's off to a pretty good start. Now, the domestic box office number here drastically reduced, compared to what it used to be back when we first got, the first couple of Bay movies. But with Bumblebee, right, sorry, let me back up for a second. With the end of those Bay films, right, it started dropping way, way off. And I think this domestic box office opening is much higher than the last Bay film, for example. And I think it's actually higher than Bumblebee. I should have had those numbers pulled up, but I do not at the moment. But like I said, its worldwide box office estimate for this weekend is $170.5 million. Which I think is pretty good. I'm hoping that means that there will be a sequel. I believe that when this film was developed, it was the start of a new trilogy of films. And with the way this film ended, kind of left it open-ended. And I'll talk about that more as I get into the review. You can clearly see kind of where this is kind of leading to or building up to. So, all right, so let me jump into the review here. The way I'm going to do this is I have the Wikipedia entry for Transformers Rise of the Beast pulled up. I'm going to go through the plot synopsis here, and as I do so, I'm going to talk about various things that I want to comment on, kind of give you my thoughts on those, but let's kind of jump into this. So again, this is on wikipedia.com. It's Transformers Rise of the Beast entry, and this is what is written for the plot. It starts off with the homeworld of the Maximals, an advanced race of Cybertronians with beast modes, comes under attack from the planet-eating dark god Unicron. His heralds, the Terrorcons, and an army of Predacon scorpions, led by Scourge, seek to obtain their master, the Maximals' greatest piece of technology, the Transwarp Key, which can open portals through space and time. The Maximal leader, Apelink, sacrifices himself to allow the other Maximals to escape the planet before Unicron devours it. Now under the command of Optimus Primal, the Maximals use the key to flee to Earth. The movie obviously kicks off, as I'm reading here, with our introduction to the Transformers, which I was really happy to see because, this is a Transformers film. That's what I want to see. I don't want to see mostly humans, with some Transformers sprinkled in. I want a film to focus on the Transformers. That's what we get here right out of the gate, is we get our introduction to Unicron, which is kind of interesting. We got our introduction to the Terrorcons, and we got our introduction to the Maximals. Now, this plot synopsis here, I don't know that I necessarily agree with this. It says, and an army of Predacon scorpions. Nowhere does it say in this film that they are Predacons. It's just whoever wrote this plot summary is just assuming that because they happen to be scorpions. as opposed to whatever the Terracons transform into at the beginning of this. We don't actually see their alt modes, so I don't know what that is. Obviously, once they get to Earth, they have more earthly modes, but at this point in time, don't know what the Terracons turn into. But those other creatures, the Scorpion characters, they look very reminiscent of Scorponok from the first Transformers movie. So do you want to call them Predacons? I don't know. Again, the movie does not reference them as Predacons. So I think the person that wrote the plot summary here is taking some liberties with that. But yeah, so they are Scorpion characters. And what we do see is the Terracons hunting down the Maximals. And Ape-Link essentially, as the plot summary here says, sacrifices himself so that the rest of the Maximals can essentially get away with this key that the Terracons are trying to track down. So the Maximals, they leave whatever this planet is. Again, we don't know what this planet is. It's never stated what this planet is. It looks very Earth-like. It's very jungle-esque, and there's like waterfalls. They're in the jungle, but again, don't know what it is. And essentially, what happens is the Terracons, track down the Maximals. They're trying to steal this key. They attack the Maximals. Ape-Link sacrifices himself, as I just said, as the plot summary here says, and that allows the rest of the Maximals to escape in, some spacecraft. And once they leave the planet, what we see is almost like some sort of warp. So it's like they're in whatever spot they're in, and we see like a warp to what looks like Earth. So my guess is that's what is occurring. What's not specifically stated here, however, is that they're also kind of going back in time. And this is my assumption, but it's never stated that that's actually what's happening. The Transwarp Key itself allows for traveling through both space as well as time. And because they happen to be Maximals here in this case, I believe this is at some point in the future, right? This is like post-Autobots. And the reason I say that is because if we look at the cartoon, right? I know this is drastically different than the cartoon, but in the cartoon, right, they are futuristic. They travel back in time. And at a certain point in this movie, Optimus Primal tells, Optimus Prime, or is at least talking about Optimus Prime, and that he kind of took his name from him, that he is sort of his namesake. So my assumption is, again, that the Maximals, that everything we see at the beginning of this movie is taking place at some point in the future. And when they leave whatever planet they're on here at the beginning with the Transwarp Key, they're not only traveling through space, but they're also traveling back in time. And that would take us back to 1994, which is where this film then opens. Now, with regards to the Terracons, Scourge is, I would say, a pretty badass type villain character. We do see, like I said, some shots of Unicron, but I think the scary type villain in this movie here is without a doubt Scourge. So this goes on to say, in 1994, Brooklyn ex-military electronics expert Noah Diaz struggles to find a job to support his family and is convinced by his friend Reek to steal a Porsche 911 to sell, only to discover that the car is the Autobot Mirage in disguise. Now that is a very, very summarized version of what actually happens in the film. Once we get to 1994 Brooklyn, that's kind of when the movie starts going into, here's our introduction to the human characters. And that's where, in my opinion, the film starts to slow down a little bit, because right, we just had this really great action scene, our introduction to the Maximals, our introduction to Unicron, our introduction to the Terracons, and then right, we jump right back into the past, essentially, right, 1994 Brooklyn, and now we're going to be introduced to the human characters. What's not mentioned here, but we do learn, is that Noah's brother has some sort of disease. So Noah is, again, he's trying to find a job to support his family. His brother has some sort of disease, which they don't specifically state what that is. But Noah does mention something about sickle cell. And right, his brother, at one point at the beginning here, he's like having some issues like working his hand. But again, it's not specifically stated what that disease is, but there's just some sort of disease that his younger brother is dealing with. And essentially he goes to a job interview, and once he gets there, the person that he was going to have the interview with essentially has canceled the interview. And Noah has no idea why. The person he was going to be meeting came down in an elevator. So Noah's trying to get past the gatekeeper at the front desk of whatever company this is. And eventually the gatekeeper lets him through. Noah goes on to meet the person he was going to be interviewing with. And he's trying to figure out, why is my interview canceled? And it turns out that the person that he was going to be interviewing with had contacted his previous commanding officer, essentially, and found out that he had some issues in the past, regarding his military background. So essentially, that's why he's canceled it, and essentially just leaves it at that. So then it goes on to he's trying to get some money, right? Because he needs to support his family. That's when he meets up with his friend Reek here, and they go on to steal the Porsche 911. And they want to sell that. And then upon doing so, upon going through this whole process of trying to steal this car, it turns out that it's not just any normal car, right? It's a Transformer. In this case, it is Autobot Mirage. So while all this is going on, we're also introduced to another character. Her name is Elena Wallace, and she's currently, I don't know if she is a student, like a college student working at a museum, or I believe that's what it is. I believe she is a college student working at a museum. And what they uncover is the statue of a Falcon bearing the Maximal symbol. And what she does is she ends up breaking it open to reveal half of the Transwarp Key hidden inside of it. Now, again, that's a very brief synopsis of what occurs in the movie. I didn't get a actual time code or, track the actual amount of time that all of this took place. But it feels like a good, 20 minutes or so, something like that. I don't think it goes 30 minutes, but it feels like a good 20 minutes or so where we have no Transformers on the screen, right? So what I just talked about with Noah, finding Mirage, and then Elena here, we don't actually get introduced to Mirage right away. The synopsis here, again, it summarized everything kind of in just a few sentences. But there's a certain amount of time where we see no Transformers on the screen whatsoever. And I want to say that's probably about 25 minutes or so. At least that's what it felt like sitting there watching it. But once we actually once we actually see Mirage on the screen, kind of at that point, we don't really have any scenes, at least that I can think of, where we don't have Transformers on the screen again from that point forward. So getting back to the synopsis here. So Elena breaks open the Falcon, reveals half of the Transwarp Key is hidden inside. The key releases an energy pulse that is detected by Optimus Prime, who summons the other Autobots. Mirage is contacted in the middle of Noah's attempted theft, and Noah winds up being roped into the Autobots' mission to recover the key so that they can use it to return to their home world of Cybertron. Now let's back up for just a second here. Once they detect this energy, they essentially know that it is a Transwarp Key. Optimus knows that that's kind of really their only way home. At this point in the film, he feels very guilty about the fact that he had called, other Autobots to the planet Earth, and now they're kind of stuck there. They have no way to get back to Cybertron for whatever reason. And with this Transwarp Key, he feels that, this is their way home because they can travel through time and space with this thing. So this is kind of his one chance to, get the Autobots back to Cybertron. It's at this point in the movie where we start to really see a lot more of the Transformers. And Mirage is one of the key players when it comes to that. In the previous films, it would have been Bumblebee, but I'm glad that the Bumblebee character took a back seat in this film because Mirage is absolutely fantastic. The way that character is portrayed, it's very relatable. He's got a great personality, and it just kind of pulls and draws you in. And the relationship that he develops with Noah really does sort of feel like a Bumblebee, Spike Witwicky, from the G1 cartoon. So to kind of see something similar in this film with a completely different character other than Bumblebee, I think is fantastic. The problem I have with Bumblebee, other than being, that character in 6 films now, is that he still does not have a voice, right? If we're to assume that, let me back up for just a second. I think with the end of the Bay films, right, and sort of that soft reboot, we're going to go back in time and tell a story before all these Bay films took place with Bumblebee. I think with Bumblebee, it was still under the assumption that this is going to lead into those Bay movies. And after seeing this film, right, Rise of the Beast, I don't think that's the case any longer. I think they're now starting over from scratch. And I think that's fantastic. But unfortunately, because they started Bumblebee off as the Bumblebee film off as a prequel to the Bay movies, they forced him to, lose his voice and damage that in that movie as well. If you recall, right, he had a voice at the beginning of the Bumblebee film because he was speaking and talking on Cybertron. But once he got to Earth, right, it's damaged, and that's no longer the case. So he had to learn to speak through the radio. That's still the case here, right? He doesn't have a voice, still speaking through the radio, which I think is terrible. I think that's long played out. I would like to see them actually give that character a voice back and just let him talk normally. But because he's taking a back seat in this, really less of an issue because Mirage is more of the standout when it comes to this type of character, right? This Mirage character is really the way for the human audience to kind of get involved with the film and then, kind of relate to the other Transformers in the movie. But again, Mirage, fantastic character. All right, so continuing on here with the plot. Drawn by the Key's signature, the Terrorcons arrive on Earth, and Elena is caught up in the conflict when the villains attack the Autobots outside the museum. Scourge deactivates Bumblebee and steals the key half before the Maximal Air Razor arrives and drives him off. Now I gotta stop right here for a second. Scourge doesn't just deactivate Bumblebee, he straight up just kills him. He's dead. In addition to that, he also steals his symbol, which seems to be a thing that Scourge does, is once he kills one of the characters, he steals their symbol, almost as like he's taking it as like a trophy or something like that. So once Air Razor shows up, again, she helps to kind of scatter the Terrorcons and force them to leave. She explains that the Maximals have been hiding on Earth for thousands of years and split the Transwarp Key into 2 to keep it out of Unicron's hands. Despite the danger, Optimus Prime is insistent that the key be reassembled so that the Autobots can use it to return home, while Noah secretly plots to destroy the key in order to keep his world safe. All right, so that's a lot of the plot just kind of wrapped up here in a little paragraph that I want to kind of dive into a little bit. So while the Autobots are fighting the Terrorcons, this power signal that's being sent out by the Transwarp Key that the Terrorcons are there to pick up for Unicron. It essentially alerts Air Razor, who shows up just like a bat out of hell, flying through the air, breathing fire. Didn't even know that this character could breathe fire, but she's breathing fire and essentially just, helps the Autobots at least turn the tide against the Terrorcons. And then the Terrorcons leave with the half of key that was inside of the Air Razor statue that Elena had found. At this point, the Terrorcons don't know that the Transwarp Key that they're holding is only half of the key. They think or assume that it's the entire key itself. So once the Terrorcons leave, they go someplace. I don't know where specifically, but they have like this weird way that they can interact with Unicron. So Scourge has, half of the key at this point, and it's almost like a virtual reality type world thing that like opens up. They're not actually in space. They're not in Unicron's physical presence at this point, from what I can tell. But it's like a projection of of like Unicron that they're seeing. And I don't mean like a physical, like there's a projector there's like projecting an image of Unicron. It's almost like they land in this space, and again, I don't know. It's almost like virtual reality. That's like the best thing I can think of or the best way to explain it, where it's like they're in this space, and then just kind of in front of them, they can see like Unicron. But there's a shot that shows them interacting with Unicron, but then it's also just like they're in their own local space, so that you don't actually see Unicron. It's kind of confusing. I'm probably not explaining it well at all, but you can kind of think of it if you go back to like the original animated Transformers movie, right? Unicron was able to interact with Galvatron, and vice versa, kind of like through their mind, right? So you would see like Galvatron like grab his head because he's being tortured by Unicron. This is something very similar, except as the audience, we're able to kind of like see like this projection of the Terracons interacting with Unicron. But again, Unicron, they're not in the same physical space. So essentially, Scourge tells Unicron that, they got the key here, and in a very similar method to what we see in the animated movie, except with a completely different character. Unicron actually tortures Scourge because what he brought him is not the Transwarp Key. It's only half of the key. And we see like Scourge like lift up in the air and kind of like fold and bend backwards, like arches backwards, like he's being physically tortured by Unicron. Because he failed in his attempt to get this Transwarp Key because he's only got half of it. I do want to comment on the Unicron voice, because the Unicron voice is terrible. I mentioned this in my straight out of the theater review, but the voice does not fit this character at all. At this point, and in this entire film, we don't really see, Unicron does not turn into a robot. He is the planet devouring, planet sized, planet alt mode of Unicron. And the voice just sounds like super generic, I guess, sort of robotish voice. Like they added some effect to it, but really it just sounds like a person talking with like a slight robotic twangy sound added to it. It does not at all sound like this big, giant, menacing robot that's going to transform and be the size of a planet. It just does not fit at all. In my straight out of the movie viewing review, I said that I wanted to see something or hear something very similar to kind of what we saw in the animated Transformers movie from 1986, because the Orson Welles voice, in my opinion, what they did to it really fits that character. And what we get here, like I said, does not fit the character at all. I hope that they change that going forward, because while he did talk in this film, it was very minimal. And Unicron was not really the big baddie in this. Clearly, he is the big baddie, but he is not the main central focus in this film. I believe that will be assuming there are sequels to this movie, I think that's kind of where they're going, that he eventually will be that. And when we do get to that point, I'm hoping that they get a better voice actor, or a better person to provide a voice, or they do something with, maybe even keep the same voice actor, but do something with the voice to make it sound big, deep, and menacing, because that's not at all what we get here. In fact, I would say Scourge's voice is more menacing than Unicron's. Okay, going back to the plot here. So it says, despite the danger, Optimus Prime is insistent the key be reassembled so the Autobots can use it to return home, while Noah secretly plots to destroy the key in order to keep this world safe. So they know about Unicron at this point, and why Noah is wanting to destroy the key is so that they can keep Unicron from coming to Earth and essentially destroying it. So that's why he's secretly wanting to destroy the second half of the Transwarp Key, so that the Terracons can't use the Transwarp Key to bring Unicron to Earth. All right, continuing on here with the plot summary. Elena's studies allow her to deduce that the other half of the key must be located in a hidden temple in Peru, and the group heads out aboard the Rattletrap cargo plane Autobot Stratosphere. So the Stratosphere character is played by John DiMaggio of Futurama fame. or Gears of War fame if you happen to be a video game player. That character is pretty cool. He's very minimally used. You don't see him prior to this. He comes landing, like flying in, transforms and lands. Essentially, picks up the Autobots. They leave, head to Peru, and we see him one more time after that, I believe, once he actually lands. So this goes on to say, in Peru, they meet up with a locally stationed Autobot Wheeljack, who leads them to the temple, but it is soon discovered that the other half of the key is no longer there. All right, so Autobot Wheeljack. So this character, I don't even know why this character exists. The character is not used much at all. The voice does not fit the character at all either. And he doesn't really add anything to the film. It's just like, oh, there's another Transformer station here. Let's show him. How do we squeeze in another character? Well, here's how we do it. And it's just a complete waste of time, in my opinion. Why even include that character? I have no idea. Right? You could have given us one of the other existing characters from the main set of cast here. You could have given them more screen time, or we could have shown another transformation sequence or something. Wheeljack is, like I said, just wasted when he's on screen, so it doesn't make sense to include him much at all. So this goes on to say, so again, they go to Peru. They are able to figure out where the other half of the key is. It's determined that in order to not alert the Terracons, the Autobots are actually going to hang back, kind of back where they landed inside a stratosphere, back on the mountain, and just kind of look over Peru while Noah and Elena head out to try to find this key. So the two of them head to where this key should be. Within the temple, they soon discover, like I said, the other half of the key is missing. The Terracons actually do, despite the fact that the Autobots were not the ones who were pursuing the key directly, did find out that, everybody's in Peru, so we're going there. We're going to start attacking. So the Terracons are attacking, and the battle ends with Scourge corrupting Airazor with Unicron's dark energy. So that's kind of like if you had a younger kid when that happens, it actually seems a little scary, because the Airazor character seems like very nice, very gentle, and then once Scourge, he like shoots something at her. It's like if I'm remembering it correctly, it's like some sort of metal device that attaches to her or something. And essentially from that point forward, right, she's corrupted. She is corrupted with this dark energy, and she starts glitching out here and there. And her, mechanical feathers she just starts sort of getting like a black inky wash over those mechanical feathers, and you can tell something is wrong. So while this is going on, the Autobots meet Optimus Primal and the other Maximals, who explain that they moved the second half of the key, entrusting it to a human tribe they have worked with over the millennia. So I want to stop right here for just a second. So again, we get our introduction to the Maximals at this point. We're about halfway through the film before the Maximals make an appearance. Roughly halfway through. In terms of the Maximals, right, so we have Optimus Primal, we have Airazor, we have Rhinox, and we have Cheetor. Don't believe I'm leaving anyone out. I think that's it. There is no Rat Trap. What's interesting at this point is, right, they're only in beast mode here. They do talk, although very, very briefly. And I don't know, I'm trying to recall this because I'm looking at the Wikipedia entry here, and it does say that David Sobolov is the voice of Rhinox. But I don't recall Rhinox speaking in this film at all. So I don't know that is the case, and that David Sobolov is the voice actor, because I want to say he didn't talk at all. So continuing on here with the plot, it says Scourge's corruption overtakes Airazor, driving her mad, and Primal is forced to kill her to save Elena. In the chaos, Noah attempts to destroy the second half of the key, but is convinced not to by Optimus, only for it to instead be stolen by Scourge, who then reassembles the two halves atop a volcano, erecting a tower and opening a portal above Earth through which Unicron will soon arrive. So it's at this point that Optimus Prime kind of starts having a little bit of a character development. Continuing on with the plot, it says, seeing where their self-serving motives have led them, Optimus Prime and Noah agree to work together to defeat the forces of evil. While the Autobots and Maximals battle the Terracons and Predacons, Again, I don't know. It's never stated anywhere in this movie that there are Predacons. It says Noah and Elena sneak in close to the Transwarp Key, planning to deactivate it with an access code Elena has uncovered. In the battle, Mirage is gravely wounded by Scourge, but transforms his damaged body into a powered exosuit for Noah so that they can fight together. So at this particular moment in time, essentially what happens is, yes, Mirage gets gravely injured and damaged. And rather than, I don't know, trying to help himself, essentially what he does is his pieces kind of reform and turn into this exosuit for Noah. It just kind of goes on his body and it turns into a suit. The look of it is sort of reminiscent of what we get in the animated film from 1986. But the way he uses the suit is kind of very reminiscent of Iron Man. In fact, once he has the suit and kind of comes landing in on the scene, he actually lands exactly like Iron Man would, right? So one knee down on the ground, fist on the ground, something straight out of the Iron Man movie. All right, so continuing on with the plot, this says that the energy pulse released by the key activates a dormant energon deposit beneath the valley where Bumblebee was kept, which infuses his deactivated body with energon and restores him to life. His revival turning the tide of the battle. I don't know if that's actually the case, that it turns the tide of the battle. I mean, he certainly helps out. I guess maybe him coming back kind of, I don't know, gave everyone an adrenaline shot in the arm or what, just like, hooray, he's back, let's go fight. But I don't think Bumblebee was missed up to that point. I certainly wasn't like, damn, I'm wishing they were bringing Bumblebee back. Where is he? Right, once he was killed off, I essentially knew that he was coming back at some point. But I don't think the film did a disservice by not including him up until this point. Continuing on with the plot, this says Optimus Prime kills Scourge, but not before the latter damages the control console to prevent it from being shut down. Willing to sacrifice himself, Prime destroys the key and collapses the portal, but Noah and Primal are able to save him from being sucked into the imploding vortex. It's at this point in the movie where the film wraps up with the same sort of closing that we have seen in the previous films, in which, you know, Optimus says, "I am Optimus Prime," and he talks about something. But following that in this film, we also get something from Noah who says, "I have no ideas," right? And then he's got his own closing line as well, which I thought was kind of cool. Following that, in the aftermath of the conflict, Elena receives recognition for discovering the temple in Peru. And then Noah goes on to another interview for a security job. Again, you know, trying to support his family. But upon doing so, he finds he's actually being invited to join a secret government organization. And here's where I was thinking, oh, right, this is going to be Sector 7. Maybe it is going to continue following the Bay films. But no, it's not Sector 7. The person that he's, you know, was meeting, that Noah was there to meet, to interview with, just puts down a card and kind of walks through. There's a wall that there's some secret lever that he he pulls, and essentially it opens up, and it opens into like this big hangar type area. Noah looks at the card and it's like, oh, you know, G.I. Joe. So it looks like there's going to be a crossover with Transformers and G.I. Joe at some point. Or this is really sort of like a backdoor reboot type thing for G.I. Joe. My guess is if there is a sequel to this film and it happens to include Noah as well, that we're going to get a G.I. Joe Transformers crossover, which I think is pretty cool. But I could also see this being right an introduction to a reboot of the G.I. Joe franchise when it comes to films as well. Following that, after a series of some of the credits, we do get a mid-credits scene where Noah is working on a car, and comes to find out that car is Mirage. And Mirage, he essentially rebuilds Mirage. Mirage comes back to life. And yeah, that's how the film ends. So that was a really quick rundown of the plot, again, via wikipedia.org. But again, overall, I really, really enjoyed this film. I'm very happy to see that it's doing well. Again, I think that what we're seeing here for the domestic weekend opening is very much in line with what was predicted. The domestic box office, it says 60 60.5 million. International box office 110 million, for a worldwide box office take of 170.5 million for the opening weekend. On the Wikipedia entry here, it does show, or does have an estimate for the budget. It says the budget is 195 to 200 million. So again, looking at the estimates here for the opening weekend, which again, including both domestic as well as international, we're at 170.5 million. So we're closing in on at least covering the production of the film. But again, I don't know what the final, if this budget that I'm seeing here on Wikipedia takes into account marketing and all of that. So if we go to Rotten Tomatoes does not have a good score, at least from the critics. It actually has, as of right now, a 53% critic score. However, the audience score is 91%, and that's from 2,500 plus verified ratings, it says. If we go in and look at the other Transformers films, for example, the Last Bay film is The Last Night here, and that had a tomato meter rating of 16%, and the audience score, and this is 25,000 plus ratings, of 43%, right? So that's a drastic difference. If we go and look at Bumblebee actually had a really good critic score of 91% on Rotten Tomatoes, and then a 74% audience score with 10,000 plus ratings there. So the critics like Bumblebee much better than this latest film, but the audience score is lower. And Rise of the Beast, again, the critic score quite a bit lower, but the audience score also quite a bit higher. So if you listen to or watch my straight out of the movie theater review of Rise of the Beast, I had stated before I actually saw the film that while I enjoy Bumblebee, it does feel very slow in certain parts of that film, that I think it does drag it down. Never did I really feel that here in Rise of the Beast. Once those human characters first hit kind of right at the beginning, I was like, oh, this is going to be a slog. But thankfully, that doesn't drag on too long. Like I said, I think it was only about 20-ish minutes or so. And once we're introduced to those human characters, we're really never not without Transformers from that point forward, which I think is fantastic for a Transformers film. I do like the action in this film. What I do not like is the bad guys, right? I don't even know what you want to call them. I'm not talking about just the Terracons, but I'm talking about like the army of just random robots that happen to come in the final fight. They actually happen to come in a couple of different scenes in this film, but I don't even know what you call them. They seem to resemble or have some of the same aesthetic as just the random Transformer robots, minions, I guess you want to call them, that the Bay films had, where they're just like nameless, sort of faceless, but they have like a certain aesthetic to them, almost very animal-esque. But they're not animals, right? They're very much robots. But the way they kind of move, or the amount of limbs they have, very animal-esque. Again, they're not called Predacons. That word is never stated in this movie at all. So I don't know what you want to call them. I wouldn't call them Decepticons. I wouldn't call them Terracons. They're just like random, menacing style robots that are just there for, the Autobots to fight. I'm not a big fan of those because other than the Scorpion ones, right? They just don't seem like Transformers to me. Even the Scorpion ones don't seem like Transformers. Again, they're just, it feels very much like they just used the Scorponok model from the first Transformers movie, and they're like, well, let's throw this in here as an Easter egg. But hey, the Transformers, the Autobots here can actually fight these things. I do like where the plot is seemingly going, which is the introduction of Unicron. I'm hoping that over the next two films, assuming those do happen, that it builds into something big, and then by the time we get to that third film, right, it's kind of everybody is against Unicron. I do want to know where the Decepticons are. No mention of Decepticons in this at all. I don't know where they are. Presumably still back on Cybertron, as we saw them in the Bumblebee film. But I don't know. Don't know what they're doing. Don't know why they're not in this. Even with just a mention. If you happen to have seen any of the Rise of the Beast Transformer toys out there in stores, There is a Megatron toy, and on the box art actually has like a model of what a Megatron might look like. It's sort of a G1-esque Megatron, but done in the style of the film here. We didn't see Megatron in the Bumblebee film. And again, there's no Decepticons in this film. I was really hoping maybe we would see that character model in this film somewhere, like at the very end, or like a post-credits scene or something like that. But we got absolutely no Decepticons at all, which I think is kind of interesting. I do hope they make a comeback at some point, and that we do see them as the main, or one of the main antagonists. I mean, it would only stand to reason that maybe the Autobots would team up with them to try to eliminate Unicron in that third movie. But again, they actually have to be introduced at some point in this film series. So yeah, I'm very curious to see where they are, see when they're going to make their comeback. Overall, I'm really happy with this film. As I said in my other straight out of the movie review, I've not been excited for a Transformers movie this much since Revenge of the Fallen. This is a much better film than Revenge of the Fallen, and I'm glad that it is currently doing well. It is number 1 for the weekend. I'm hoping that this continues to do well in the theater. Looks like next weekend we do have The Flash, which was probably going to push this movie back from number 1 at that point. But I am happy that it is number 1 this weekend. I hope it continues to do well. I do like the fact that the audience score seems to be really high. And I hope word of mouth for this film continues to carry. Yeah, that is my review of Transformers Rise of the Beast. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. I'm very curious to see what you think of the film. And if you have any questions for me, be sure to post them down there and I will try to answer them for you. All right, until next time, this is Jesse and I am signing off.